podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
A pre-season-esque first half of the Community Shield came to life with a spell of impressive Manchester United pressure, but the Reds couldn't make it pay, nor could they see out a narrow, but deserved victory. Erik ten Hag's unorthodox selection and substitutions had worked for 80-odd minutes, but Facundo Pellistri at right-back was beaten at the far post, and to penalties it went. United had the early advantage with Andre Onana's save, but misses from Jadon Sancho first, and then Johnny Evans allowed City to win 7-6. Most would agree that United and City have different targets for the upcoming season, and most likely different destinies too, but this was an even game at Wembley to open the season, a taste of defeat that Reds will hope lights the fires of the team for the months to come.
It hurts in your stomach, and we have to take this. But you have to hurt. You have to feel pain now, because that will drive us. That will give us motivation to do better. And what we can take positive out is that we can compete with City, and we have to take this belief into the league.
A very warm welcome to the Manchester United Weekly Podcast with me, Harry Robinson and Jack Tait. Thanks for joining us. We'll be reviewing Saturday's loss first, but also discussing the deals for the Bayern brothers, Matthias de Ligt and Noussair Mazraoui. We'll play Guess the Player with an exciting new format for this season. There's a short academy briefing as well, a bonus Q&A for our patrons, and we're looking ahead to the first Premier League match of the season against Fulham at Old Trafford on Friday night. Let's begin. Jack, first of all, your overall shorts in brief on what was a disappointing end, but there were certainly positives to take, weren't there?
I think the biggest thing for me is much better than expected, and performance-wise. Obviously, would have loved to get through on penalties and win the actual Community Shield, but not really the most important thing in terms of the rest of the season. I thought, especially given all of the issues we had in team selection, kind of an unorthodox setup, especially in attack and in defence. I think United did pretty well. 20 minutes. I think the first 20 minutes, with City were very dominant. We didn't really have much in the game, but after that, grew into it. And I think over the course of the 90 minutes, probably deserved to get the win. So look, despite a loss on penalties, it's never fun to watch. I think there's a lot of good signs actually going into the season. Yeah, let's talk about that. We've both used the word unorthodox already, and I was reading The Athletic this morning, and Laurie Whitwell uses the same word. He called it an afternoon of unorthodox selections, and it really was. The lineup was a surprise. We spoke in our preview episode about the potential for Mason Mount to play at number 10, to get into a bit of a groove as the season begins and allow Bruno Fernandes some rest before he comes back. We spoke about Ahmad likely starting, and that came to fruition. We didn't know. I don't think we even came into consideration the idea that Kobbie Mainoo could start just 3 and a bit weeks after he played in the Euros final in Berlin. Lisandro Martinez starting, slightly unexpected, probably a little more what we had in mind just because of the injuries in defence, unlike in midfield for Kobbie. But we were kind of debating whether it was an opportunity for Harry Mas to get his debut, and instead he wasn't in the squad, which certainly was unexpected, particularly after he travelled down alongside Toby Collier, who did come off the bench to make his debut. But you then had what happened during the game. I mean, first of all, Martinez at left back, but then Pellistri comes on at right back. It was one of those moments where I was standing behind the goal at Wembley, and a lot of substitutions happen at once, and you're kind of being swept away by a sunny afternoon. You've had a few pints and all these substitutions happens, and everyone's turning around to each other going, what? I don't understand what our team looks like anymore. So can you try sum up and explain? Possibly the more interesting thing is the impact of these. Is there anything to learn from what Ten Hag did to start with first? Well, I think to start with, it shows he clearly doesn't trust Harry Mas just yet. I think it was the biggest thing, and that was 100% the biggest surprise to me. Not necessarily that he didn't start, but I mean, not even having him in the squad, that we ended up paying for it. When Maguire needed to come off, our only option was to put Pellistri, a player who, to be honest, looked like he was on his way out of Manchester United, probably still is on his way out of Manchester United, doesn't seem to have a future here. Putting him in an unfamiliar position, having to shift Dalot to his unfavoured position at left back, Martinez having to switch during the game. You end the game with a back four of Pellistri, Johnny Evans, Lisandro Martinez, and Diogo Dalot at left back. I think you would have got pretty long odds a few weeks ago for that being a back four combination you would have seen in the Community Shield. I think the fact that Amas wasn't even on the bench is a strange one. Even Ten Hag, we had no.
I didn't see whether anyone asked him about that. I suppose it was hardly the biggest issue of the day, so it's very possible it wasn't asked in the press conference. I've not seen that it was, but given he travelled, and it did feel like I certainly got the sense that he was going to be involved in the squad. Him and Toby Collier, particularly after pre-season, but just given the injuries as well. So I wonder whether maybe he had a knock for whatever reason, but it felt strange for him to travel and then not be in the team and there'd be no substitute defender. The fact there was not a single defender on the bench made you think,
no.
Well, I wonder if Harry had a knock or something, but it didn't seem like anyone else for that.
It's especially strange given that Maguire came into the game having not played much football at all, had to go off after 60, 70 minutes. I don't think because he picked up a fresh injury, just because he hasn't had any minutes and doesn't have any match fitness. It wasn't unexpected that we'd have to make a start at the back.
And obviously I imagine the Wan-Bissaka transfer, it might be completed by the time we record this. Suggestions are he'll have a medical at West Ham on Monday as we're talking. It's probable that Wan-Bissaka would have started that game had he been available, so that changes things as well. We don't know en masse, but it's possible Tenhag doesn't trust him yet. His comments in pre-season were interesting, where he effectively said he feels 2 or 3 months away from being ready to play first-team football. But given this wasn't the Premier League, given his strong performances on pre-season, you thought he might have given him this opportunity anyway. Other than that, Martinez at left-back, still interesting, even with all the context around it, and with the signings of Lenny Yoro and Matthias de Ligt, there are some strong centre-back options. Do you think, after watching him play there for a while, that might happen again during the season?
I think there's a chance that it could. I don't think it should.
Yeah.
I didn't think he was particularly great at left back. I think there are two parts to this. The first is the defensive side of things, and to be honest, I thought Oscar Bob ran him ragged for a lot of the game. He really struggled to contain him down City's right-hand side. Oscar Bob played well, but I think someone who is maybe slightly more experienced and used to playing at left back maybe could have dealt with him a little bit better. Then the other side of the game is when we have possession. And actually, I thought that was even more interesting because we really saw Martinez stepping into midfield much, much more frequently than we used to see Shaw do it. Shaw would do it occasionally when he was at left back. Dalla would do it occasionally when he would play at left back. But Martinez, it was almost every single time United had the ball and tried to build up from deep, he'd go into midfield. Now, he looked pretty good in that role, and you'd probably say from all of our options at left back, he's probably the one you'd actually want in there the most. He's the most comfortable on the ball. He can pick a pass, especially a forward pass, the best out of all of those options that I just mentioned. The issue, though, is that it meant we were often a little bit disjointed. It ended up with Johnny Evans, when he was playing left centre-back in the first half, almost ended up playing out as a left-back at times as Martinez would shift infield. Evans would then make a run out wide, but then if the ball broke down, City would end up coming back at us and Johnny Evans would be at left-back, Martinez would sort of be at central defensive midfield, Casemiro would be as a central centre-back, Maguire would almost be as like a wide right centre-back. It was all a bit disjointed. I think if that's a window into how Ten Hag wants to use his fullbacks this year, it's really interesting because it is something we've seen a little bit of before, but this seemed to be a much bigger commitment to that than we've seen previously, and it's a skill set actually that I don't think suits Luke Shaw at all. I think that really takes away from what I think is Luke Shaw's best quality, which is his ability to give us an option out wide. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops through the season. But
so he could.
I thought Martinez was fine, but definitely not someone I'd want to see back at left back very often. Yeah,
I didn't feel particularly comfortable with him at left back, and then I think we saw a lot more of his quality when he shifted into central defence. Yeah, there was a couple of other slight change. Harry Maguire taking goal kicks rather than Andre Onana was interesting, and it all feels like a renewed emphasis on building a familiarity with a certain way of playing out that seemed to, I think we saw in pre-season last year, and then seemed to disappear as results started to get more and more negative.
Yeah, we've seen that at times before. A defender coming back, taking the goal kick to Onana. I seem to remember it happening. The game that really springs to my mind with that is, I think, Anfield last year.
Yeah.
Where almost every single time we had the ball from a goal kick, it would be whoever was playing at centre-back that day, playing it short to Onana looking for options. Clearly no one in United's defence or midfield really wanting the ball, no one making a good option, and then we'd pump it long anyway. And so all you've really done is invited Liverpool.
But we didn't lose 7-0.
We didn't lose 7-0, this is true. So it's something we've seen a little bit before, but yeah, it seemed like the commitment to that and the commitment to trying to play out the back was there. I noticed some good and some bad. I think the good was that I saw much better movement from United at the back. I mentioned that at times it could get us into trouble when we lost the ball because we had a few players out of position. But I thought the rotations were much better. Casemiro would often drop into the defensive line. He kind of sit in the middle of Maguire and Evans. They would sort of shift a little bit wider as Martinez went into midfield. Dalla would then push a little bit higher up on the right-hand side. It was better movement. Cobby would come short as he often does. He's very good at being able to understand how to give someone a good angle for a pass. The issue, though, was that we're still not quite good enough playing under pressure. So even once we've made these decent movements to get on the ball, it goes into Maguire, it goes into Casemiro, it goes into even Martinez, or at times Kobbie Mainoo, and the ball gets turned over too frequently. And it's that.
Is that a team issue or individuals?
I think it's both. I think there are individuals in there who aren't suited to that. Like, that's not Maguire's game. It's not Johnny Evans' game. I'd argue it's not even Casemiro's game, although he looks better, I think, being a little deeper, receiving with generally facing the play rather than coming short from midfield and receiving with his back to goal. But I think it's a team issue in that our rotations are decent when, say, Onana has the ball, but then the movement off of that first pass isn't good enough. We're too static once the ball is rolled into, say, Kobbie in midfield, or Martinez, as it was, who was sort of stepped into midfield a lot of the time. There's not that second movement. There's none of the defenders are then making the move to create that little one-touch wall pass to get us out of that first line of press. It was like we'd play 6 or 7 decent passes, but we wouldn't take a single City player out of the game. Even if you go back and watch, I watched the whole 90 minutes yesterday, and I think for the first minute of the game, minute and a half, and we had the ball the entire time. I don't think we got out of our own half. And I mean that as both a compliment and an insult. Like, we don't seem to have the ability just yet to keep the ball in relatively comfortable possession and progress up the field.
Yeah, the first half, bar 5 minutes, felt pretty poor.
Yeah. Overall,
the second was quite different. Was there anything that changed at halftime that created that? Because the subs didn't come. I remember as the subs were made, thinking this might feel like the wrong time to make them because United were just growing into the game and getting some real momentum. So it wasn't just the substitutions that changed United. So do you think it was something Ten Hag said, or was there a really obvious change in what we were doing watching on TV?
I was trying to figure that out too, because as I was watching the game, I didn't feel like anything had massively changed other than we were just sort of executing better, which feels like a bit of a unsatisfactory.
Yeah, but the first half of the Community Shield, it's the first half of football of the season.
Yeah. Of
competitive football. So it might simply be a case of they were getting used to the pace and intensity, because there were moments of this that very much felt like the Community Shield. There were other where you thought, this feels like a proper Manchester derby. This has a bit of bite to it. So I think felt like it took both sides a bit of time to get into that.
Yeah, no, 100%. It took a while to warm up. I think from United's point of view, this wasn't a constant thing that changed. I don't think this explains the entire shift in performance. But when we had our moments where we did move the ball really, really well, it was all because we moved the ball quickly. If you look at both the move leading up to the chance for Ahmad where he tried to square it to Mason Mount, Rashford's chance where he puts it wide, there's a couple of other really tidy bits of football as well. It's all one-touch football, especially in the lead up to even in the lead up to the goal, actually, as well. We win the ball back. Pellistri heads it down. Not the goal, actually, when Rashford hits the post. Pellistri heads it down in the right back area. It goes down, I think, to Casemiro, and then goes into, I think, was it Kobbie, and then back to Casemiro, or Collier, back to Casemiro, into Bruno, to Garnacho, to Rashford. It was 7 touches, I counted, from once he won the ball back to Rashford shooting. And we moved the ball 75 yards. And it was the same for the Ahmad chance in the first half, the Rashford chance in the first half. And
that's the kind of thing that leads Guardiola to say post-match, they're one of the best teams in the world in transition. Yeah. And it's something he said year after year, and something we've been very good at, manager after manager.
Although, to be fair, I think that is definitely true, and that's still clearly our biggest strength. But to be fair, the Ahmad chance in the first half, the Rashford chance in the first, don't come from transition. What they come from is controlled possession in City's half of the pitch. They have pretty much every player bar like Haaland behind the ball, but we were able to pick spaces and pick routes through that block because we shifted the ball so quickly. I mean, the play in the build-up to Rashford's chance in particular is brilliant. Bruno Fernandes into Casemiro, one pass into Kobbie, got a little touch on it. Casemiro again out to Rashford. Again, it's all one touch. That's how you get past and get through these low blocks. You just have to move the ball so quickly. It's something that I think United have struggled with. And to be fair, I think it's actually something that Ahmad helps with a lot too, because he's so direct as a runner. He doesn't necessarily take people on as often as, say, Rashford, but he commits people quickly. And that means that even when he's just playing a 1-2, let's say with Casemiro, because he's brought the defender in, it creates that space in behind to be able to play that 1-2 and have a little space in which to do it. Other wingers, like a Rashford, for example, is a slightly different style in that when he often receives the ball, he often slows it down, and his quality is the change of pace. It's the ability to go from zero to sprinting immediately. Ahmad is a little bit more, everything is done at pace, and it's just a different style. But Ahmad's helps, I think, when you're playing against a deep block.
Yeah, he's a completely different type of winger to Garnacho and Rashford. And Garnacho is playing in some ways as Rashford was when he was in form some time ago.
Yeah.
It's explosive, and that's the difference. Ahmad feels creative. The other two feel explosive. Yeah. It was great to see Ahmad play that well again. I was slightly surprised he was taken off when he was. He's so well liked in the team, and that's really coming across. And we spoke about him last week as the one that I think everyone's hoping is the breakout player of the season, and that performance certainly felt like that.
I think it's pretty clear now going into the season that the two winger spots is between Ahmad, Garnacho and Rashford. Yeah, absolutely. And he certainly helps with the type of play that you were just talking about. I think what will be interesting is it goes back to something that Ten Hag spoke a lot about in his first season, rest defence, this term that kind of he introduced to the Premier League, which basically means your defence left behind when you have the ball and are attacking. So if you lose the ball, how quickly can you get back into your defensive shape? And I think that's where United will have to be so much better than we have been in the last couple of seasons. Because if you're essentially playing a riskier game. If you're playing one or two touch football and moving the ball very quickly, that if the execution isn't right, and it's very easy for the execution to be off by just a little bit, you're much more likely to lose the ball, and you're going to lose the ball in a position where you're probably in some danger at the back. So I don't think we saw loads of this to be able to make any conclusions yet, but that will be, I wouldn't be surprised if in the first few weeks of the season we play like that and we concede a few goals because of it with the other team on the transition. The kind of positive way of thinking about that is by playing like that, you either break down the opposition or you create a counter-attack for the other team, which then makes it a very transition-heavy game. And as long as you defend the team's counter-attack, you then have the kind of perfect opportunity, which United love because of the players that we have, which is you can now do the counter-attack, probably have some success. So that might be the ultimate goal. I think, so we know that United at times can thrive in these chaotic games. It was basically our entire second half of last season with these chaotic tennis match games, what we called them.
Yeah.
There are two big considerations there in terms of the defensive side of things for United in transition. One is, can the midfield deal with that? We know that Casemiro's, his mobility it was never his strongest part of his game anyway, and it's probably on the decline now as well. Plus, I think actually we're seeing that I think he carries much more of an attacking threat than we probably thought when he joined, and you don't necessarily want to lose that either. I don't think Kobbie Mainoo covers ground as well as he probably will 2 or 3 years from now. I think that's also probably the weakest part of his game. And again, you'd want him to be a big part of our attacking play as well. I think the difference is that you'd hope in the centre-backs that we have both Yoro and De Ligt joining, Martinez now coming back from injury, should be able to handle transitions better. I think De Ligt is still not really suited to that style of play, but he's better at it than, say, Maguire or Lindelof. Martinez, we know, can be very good in those situations. Then it's the fullbacks. Again, we're losing Wan-Bissaka, which is a skill set that's quite useful. Or, obviously you lose out on some of the attacking play with him, but we're now losing that skill set. So it's going to be interesting to see how United adjust to that, whether there is any difference in the way that we set up in when we do have controlled possession in the attacking half, how we want to deal with it, or if we're confident enough. Say if Yoro and Martinez, or Martinez and De Ligt, or De Ligt and Yoro end up being kind of the first choice partnership when everyone's fit, if we feel confident enough in our new centre-backs options that they can sort of deal with most of that on its own. I think, especially at home, I think that will be the main threat against United. We've conceded goals like that at Old Trafford so often in the last 5 or 6 years, and I think it will continue to be probably the biggest threat against us when we're playing teams at Old Trafford. Yeah,
you would imagine the first choice. I mean, I think the intended first choice defensive partnership is Yoro and Martinez. Yeah. And we know Martinez is strong in that role. We're going to come on to De Ligt and Mazraoui, the two potential new signings, should be confirmed fairly soon, you'd think. They've both travelled from Munich to Manchester shortly. We'll talk a bit more about Casemiro in the midfield in the Patron Q&A, but we should mention Garnacho. We've given some praise to Ahmad, but it's a great goal. I wasn't really expecting to see loads of him in the game because he's only recently come back, but we spoke before about he's a player who keeps adding more and more to his game. And this was a goal of real quality in a style that I don't really remember him scoring previously. And it was great to see. And it's amazing hearing Viva Garnacho being sung at Wembley like that. It's amazing at Old Trafford, and it brings back memories, like childhood memories of singing Viva Ronaldo at Old Trafford, which is always pretty special. And I remember when I first heard people say, it seemed inevitable. I remember being at a game at Old Trafford in the season Garnacho made his debut. So he made his debut in April against Chelsea, having in between the Youth Cup semi-final and Youth Cup final. I remember someone singing a terrible song for him and thinking, A, that's a rubbish song, and B, this is way too early, and C, it's inevitable that he will take Ronaldo's song because it fits. He wants to be Ronaldo. He plays a bit like a young version of him and he's emulating him in every way. And then when people started singing Viva Garnacho, I remember thinking, it's a bit early. Like, we need to calm down a little bit because he could easily get ahead of himself. But he has earned it. And I interviewed him for the Lifeblood series back in January, and probably the best line out of it was him saying, it's amazing for me to think, like, as a boy, I loved going to football with my dad and I dreamt about playing in the biggest stadiums. So to hear your name being sung by like the fans of the biggest club in the world is pretty amazing. And I thought about that when I was at Wembley, and it's such a good song, and the noise it generates.
It is,
is brilliant. There's a great clip, slight sidetracked, but there's a great clip of United fans in Moscow in 2008 singing Viva Ronaldo in the subway. And because of the like enclosed space, the noise, it's on an old mobile phone.
Yeah.
But the noise is just incredible. And yeah, it was lovely. And it's a shame that wasn't a winning goal, because another great Wembley moment for Garnacho, another great moment for him, and to do it so early in the season. We know he's a confidence player, and to get that confidence early in the season is great. To score at Wembley either side of your 20th birthday is pretty good going in the final and first game of a season. Yeah. It's good for him.
It's such a cliche, but he's just a player that makes things happen. Like, that's probably, I think, the biggest thing I can say about him is it's not always perfect. He's not particularly refined. I don't think everything's a little bit manic, a little bit all over the place, but he causes so many issues anytime he comes on the pitch. I mean, you even go back, talk about his form at Wembley, you even go back to the FA Cup final the previous season, so not the one that we won.
He was the best player for United
when we lost. He came on for 15, 20 minutes towards the end, and he was the only player that we had that looked anything like scoring in that game. I mean, he very nearly dragged us back into that cup final. Played really, really well in the cup final just gone. As he came on, was probably the best player on the pitch for the 25 minutes or so that he saw in the Community Shield. I think Garnacho is such an interesting case, I think, because he was someone that, obviously there was a lot of excitement about him coming through the youth team, got a lot of exposure through the Youth Cup, winning the Youth Cup, which gets a lot more eyes on United's youth team than anything else. And then he came into the first team and he was okay. He didn't do it, like, it wasn't bad in any way, but it wasn't like Kobbie Mainoo, for example, where as soon as Kobbie got a couple of starts, you knew straight away he was going to be starting every week. But partially that was because of our lack of other options, but he kind of set the world on fire straight away. Garnacho wasn't like that when he came into the team. It's been a little bit of a slow burn, but very steady, quite linear progress, actually, which is quite rare for a player of still this young. And now it feels like this year we might get a version of him that started to take it to the next level. And hopefully can put that end product together a little bit more consistently. But I mean, he's such a player, and again, he just makes things happen. Like, he thrives in this kind of chaotic United team, and I think the challenge for him will be adding a little bit. I don't want to take away that manic part of his game, because it's what makes him so good. But you want to add at certain moments, especially when United are playing against teams that are going to sit deep, that little bit of refinement just to be able to unlock defences where the game isn't quite as chaotic. But I'm so excited for him and Ahmad this year. I think they're two wingers that we've got a lot of hope for. Yeah,
he should have had an assist for the chance created for Rashford as well. We haven't got time to talk Rashford in detail, but he just needs a goal.
Yeah,
he did some good things. He did some bad things. If he doesn't score early in the season, then I fear for how the full 9 months could play out for him. and for United as a result, because for United to be our best, we need a Rashford at his best. But I really hope so. But yeah, I could see when that ball came across, we were stood right behind that goal, probably somewhere in between where the pass was played and where it was going to. And I could, time, I mean, it's silly, isn't it? But like time seems to slow down a bit. I felt like I could see Rashford thinking it through and trying to compose himself and thinking, I need to go with my left foot. And I could see the whole thought process. And then, and you don't want your strikers to be thinking too much. And finishing doesn't feel natural to him at the moment. It feels like time's slowing down for him and he's thinking everything through. And we know that that's Rashford's at his best when it's quite an instinctive game. So, but I just, if he can get a goal in the first couple of games, that'd be great, because at least that then gives him a platform to go from. Whatever you think, there's plenty of United fans who think Rashford should be sold, and it's a perfectly fair opinion. But you just, regardless of what you think, you want him to have the platform from which he can prove himself. And if he doesn't score in the first few games, I fear the pressure and it all will get a bit much.
Well, and this is the thing, these cycles of Rashford having good year, bad year, good year, bad year. Yeah. They become self-affirming. And so you're starting now to hear, like when I listen back to the game with ITV commentary, for example, you start to hear Ali McCoist and Sam Matterface talking about, he still hasn't got a goal, which Rashford are we going to get this season kind of thing. And the more that gets talked about, the more it's in Rashford's mind, the more it becomes this big thing where if he hasn't scored in the first 3 or 4 games, it's okay, this is going to be a bad Rashford year, whatever. And it becomes self-affirming. He needs to try to get out of that. Look, to be honest, I think he's been fine in pre-season. I think he was pretty good for most of the Community Shield. As Ten Hag said after the game, I'd rather him be getting into those positions and missing than not getting into them at all. But it's hard when...
But you've got to score.
He's not and he's not a young player anymore. That's the difference. 4 or 5 years ago, that was an acceptable place for Rashford's career to be at. It's not really anymore. And that's tough on him. It's tough as part of being, on paper at least, one of sort of the talisman, one of the biggest names at Manchester United. There is a lot of pressure that comes at you with that. And he needs a goal in the first few games just to quiet that down, to allow him to kind of focus on actually just being the best player that he can be. Because we know that when he's at his best, he can be great.
Yeah. Bruno, fantastic. And it's a great shame that goal was disallowed because it was beautiful. We are going to talk a couple more bits in the Patron Q&A, but for now, we're going to talk about the 2 potential new signings, Ligt and Mazraoui. But first, it's time for the first Guess the Player of the season, and a slight change in format for this season.
Welcome to the first segment of United Weekly Pod's Guess the Player. My name is Craig, and I'll be taking this over throughout the 2024-25 season. This year's Guess the Player is sponsored by 505 Sportswear, a clothing brand forged from a love of music and football. You can find us at 505 Sportswear on Instagram or 505sportswear.com. United Weekly Pod listeners can receive 20% off their first order with the code UTDWeeklyPod at checkout. So we'll get started with the first clue. I won the Youth Cup for Manchester United this century before leaving 2 years later in search of first team football.
Okay.
Paul Pogba.
I know. Paul Pogba's the one that comes instantly to mind. Having won it in 2011 and leaving in 20... Did he leave in 2013?
I was actually just going to say, I don't even know if 2 years was the right... I think he might have left 1 year later, if off the top of my head, but I don't know.
There are 3 teams. I mean, it could be a member of the 2022 winning team, because we are now 2 years out. So you never know. It could be Charlie McNeil or Easy Cancellara, both of who have left the club this year. But you've also got 2003 and 2011. I can't guess based on that. Yeah. But just to give you more of an idea of the format, Jack and I will now be competing against each other in the same episode every week for Guess the Player, with Craig setting the clues throughout the season. We'll have clue 2 after a bit of transfer talk. Another intervention now from one of my match-going mates, Matthias de Ligt. Before we start and mention him any further, I asked my Dutch mate to give us the correct pronunciation of Matthias de Ligt. So here you go.
De Ligt. Matthijs de Ligt.
Matthijs de Ligt. I'm not sure how much that'll be.
De Ligt.
Yeah, de Ligt. With like the Eric Ten Hag. It's meant to be at the end.
Yeah.
But that's not quite translated over to English football. 45 million euros plus 5 million euros add-ons and a 5-year contract with a potential for an extra year. What do you think of this? He's essentially Raphael Varane's replacement. Is he a good one?
if you take the range of outcomes of this signing, I think the top end is very, very good.
Yeah.
He's played with Ten Hag before. We've seen him be the highest. He was basically Lenny Yoro before Lenny Yoro. He was the highest touted teenage centre-back in Europe 4 or 5 years ago. And for a reason, he was brilliant for Ten Hag's Ajax. He was captain of Ajax at, I think, 19. You watch him in that Champions League run, he was phenomenal. He's obviously then gone away, first to Juve, then to Bayern, struggled at Juve, has been, I think, better when he's played at Bayern, but a few injury issues. I think also struggled to adapt to, the Bundesliga isn't the highest standard of competitiveness in the world, but I think compared to just how dominant Ajax were at the time under Ten Hag in the Eredivisie, he's struggled a little bit, I think, adapting to the Bundesliga. I have some concerns over his fit in terms of play style with the way that the demands of the Premier League. Yeah. That's, I think, where I think the range of outcomes here, the downside is pretty low, because I think he could get kind of swept up in the Premier League, basically just kind of eating him up. But if he can overcome that, I think there is a really, really big upside to this transfer. I don't mind the fee. I'm glad at least that United are doubling down at centre-back. This doesn't seem like it's a response to the Euro injury. We were clearly working on De Ligt anyway. And I think it's good that we're focusing so much attention on fixing the centre-back issues after Varane left. I'd expect maybe Lindelof to go in the next month or so, in the next 3 weeks, if we can find a decent deal for him. But I think it's a good signing, but with some risk that I think the Premier League could be a struggle for him to adapt to.
Yeah. One of the overall main positives is you now have three quality centre-backs who are going to be at the club for several years to come in Yoro, Martinez and De Ligt, whereas we expect Lindelof and Maguire, unlikely that both will go this summer, but I'd be surprised if both are here for the start of next season. So you're looking at your core for the next 5 years, and that's a good thing. I agree. I think he could face some of the same issues that Maguire sometimes has in terms of getting beaten by quicker players, more mobile players, whether that be quicker with their footwork or just with their pure pace and acceleration.
Yeah.
I think the cause for hope is that he seems to balance with Martinez quite well.
Right.
We know, as we mentioned earlier, Martinez is great at recovery. That's one of he's just a great defender in that sense normally. And De Ligt is massive and good in the air, which is what Martinez isn't. He's good in the air, but he's not a dominant box defender from corners in each box. So it seems like it could be really good. He's also, if you're looking for upgrades on the defenders that he will be playing instead of Maguire and Lindelof, essentially, he's a better passer of the ball by some distance, which is useful in any scenario, but particularly if Martinez isn't playing. So if Lenny Yoro's playing, we're led to believe he's a very good passer of the ball, but he's young, so you want someone else who is good as well. But particularly if he's playing alongside Johnny Evans or Victor Lindelof, if he stays, or even Maguire. So I think there's, it's one where you have to wait and see, but I think I'm both excited and intrigued. Yeah. And I think it's a reasonable fee to take a little bit of a chance on. You don't want to be splashing 40 million quid for a massive risk, but you're willing for there to be one doubt. I think they'll be fine with his injury record recently. Juventus, he had a terrible time. Bayern last season, he missed a few games, but there was a positive stat I read somewhere. He's missed 27 matches in the last 3 seasons, which is the same as Maguire, who we typically see as being very reliable. Fewer than Lindelof, who's missed 31, and way fewer than Martinez, who's missed 67. So I don't think they'll be too concerned. And besides these knocks, he's a impressive figure.
I think the De Ligt, you mentioned it, it's a little bit of a punt in that there is some risk here. I think that punt looks better having already signed Yoro as well, because De Ligt isn't coming in being he's obviously going to start a lot of games, especially before Yoro comes back from injury. But we're not bringing him in to be, you are the saviour of United's defence for the next 10 years. Yeah. That's sort of what Yoro has been brought in to do. And I think that the fact that both of them have come in benefits each other, because it's going to help protect Yoro a little bit. If he has a tough couple of games, we can easily take him out, bring in De Ligt, very, very experienced, very good defender. Vice versa, it means that if De Ligt does take some time to get used to the league, maybe Yoro could step in. We still have Maguire here. assuming that he doesn't. I'm assuming Lindelof might leave, maybe Maguire leaves instead, but if you still have one of those two, they can easily step in as someone who maybe the quality isn't quite there, but very experienced, again, very used to playing in the Premier League. I think that it's going to make the bedding in process for both Euro and De Ligt easier that the other one is there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as far as we know, another pretty positive influence in the dressing room for everyone.
Yeah.
And I guess that's also one of the things you're removing in terms of the doubts column is knows him very well, as does Andre Onana and a couple of the others from the squad like Anthony. So taking one of those doubts, I think we have bigger picture concerns over another Ten Hag linked signing, the same as with Mazraoui, which doesn't feel like what Ineos were probably intending at the start of this window or aiming for long term. I expect this is probably a one-off because Dan Ashworth couldn't start till mid-July, neither could Omar Barada. Jason Wilcox only started at the very end of the season. So this window is a bit of a hybrid Ineos Ten Hag model. And I think from now on, you're likely to see less signings. That would be the positive outlook on it. Noussair Mazraoui.
Can I just say one last thing on De Ligt too? You mentioned good influence in the dressing room. Also someone who's just used to winning. Yeah. And I don't think that can be taken for granted. Obviously I think he's won the league in with Ajax, Juve and Bayern. So not necessarily the most competitive leagues in Holland and in Germany with the dominance of those teams at the time, but someone who's very used to winning, expects to win. We know the good that can do in a dressing room that quite honestly isn't used to winning at the same rate as someone like De Ligt.
Yeah, and he doesn't just know Andre Onana, he has played with him, and so there is already that understanding. He's also, and my mate Kieran pointed this out on Saturday, we think he's the first player who fits. There's a United song that's about "We all hate City," tra-la-la-la-la, "We all hate City," which was being sung in various places, understandably on Saturday. And the second verse is, "You can stick your Bayern Munich, Juventus, Ajax too," and then it goes on. He must be the first player who fits that line to play for Man United, to have played for Bayern Munich, Juventus, and Ajax too, and also in that order. He's just had Bayern Munich, Juventus before, and Ajax too. So we're working on a song for De Ligt which fits with that old line from a very old United song. So
it's some list of clubs for him. I know. Fourth club, you couldn't really ask for many bigger.
Imagine if that career was especially if that career was like in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, like mid-90s.
80s going into 90s, yeah. Those four clubs, especially then, it'd be amazing. But yeah, I look forward to seeing him play. And Mazraoui, essentially, Wan-Bissaka's replacement. This is essentially a point of personal preference for Ten Hag, isn't it? He wants a slightly different right back. The fees are almost identical. Ages of the players, I think they're both 26. So it's, my concern is I always saw Wan-Bissaka as a really useful player he's just such a useful option to have. And this isn't going to happen this season, but say United play Real Madrid in 18 months' time, and you're thinking, who can we play that we really think is going to stop Kylian Mbappe? It would be Wan-Bissaka. Yeah. And you would lose a bit of your attacking intent at the Bernabeu, but you would have that option you could really rely on. So I think that's where it's a balance and both sides of the arguments. And if Ten Hag thinks Mazraoui is going to be better suited to United style more consistently, then fine. It's good signing.
And it sort of remains to be seen, I think, how Ten Hag wants to change this team. I think all of the signings this year, especially De Ligt, especially De Ligt, Zirkzee and Mazraoui, slightly less in Euro because I think that is more just, he's such a good talent and he's still got to develop this side of his game a little bit more. But this suggests to me that Ten Hag is really doubling down on this possession-based approach, or I guess maybe more reverting back to it and away from the transition-heavy approach. I think he still knows that United will be a very good transition team, but I think he maybe has realised that relying on that to get us through games is probably not sustainable. You look at all of the signings he's made. De Ligt, probably his biggest strength is his ability on the ball. He's a very, very good ball-playing centre-back. Mazraoui to Wan-Bissaka, swap deal basically with Wan-Bissaka, obviously not swap deal, but for United's point of view, kind of swapping Wan-Bissaka for Mazraoui, really just bringing in a player who is much more comfortable on the ball, probably a little bit more deficient defensively compared to Wan-Bissaka, at least in one-on-one defending, but hopefully a little bit more secure on the ball. Zirkzee as well, not a striker in the sense of Højlund, who might only have 15, 20 touches of the ball every game, but he's just kind of a box crasher, someone who is going to want the ball to feet, be able to actually be part of our build-up a lot more. It seems like Ten Hag is trying to move the team in that direction a little bit more. it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I think we saw some elements of that in the Community Shield, and it'll be interesting to see how these new players fit into that, because really, we didn't have any new signings on the pitch.
I was surprised Zergs didn't come on at any point.
Yeah, so was I. I hope that's not a sign of things to come. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just, I think, because we've had concerns about how he fits in, that worried me a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like maybe Ten Hag doesn't know how he fits in. But we were, at the time when he would have come on, it seemed like we were in the ascendancies. Maybe he just didn't want to change things.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's have guess the player clue 2 from Craig.
And now for the second clue. I come from the same country as Manchester United legends Roy Keane and Dennis Irwin. Okay.
So, 2 clues. Won the FA Youth Cup for United this century and left 2 years later. And he comes from, I think we can probably give away the answer to that. Comes from Ireland.
Yeah.
I wonder if he comes from Cork, like Keane and Owen as well. But that's not been stipulated, so probably not. Any immediate guesses based off that? Or just say whether you've got a player in mind. I've got one.
I don't have a specific player in mind. I'm trying to run through Irish players from those couple of teams.
I think I have a decent idea. I'll message it to you during the Patron Q&A. Let's dive into that. So ad break for normal listeners and Patron Q&A for our patrons.
This episode is brought to you by our good friends at NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. I'm sure by now you've all gotten back into your Sunday routines, but they could be even better. With NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get the most live NFL games all in one place, every game, every Sunday. And you can even watch up to 4 different games at once with multi-view, one of my favorite inventions of this decade. It's exactly what you need to catch all the action, make your Sundays more magical. And also, YouTube TV is great. I got it this year. It's awesome. Sign up now at youtube.com/BS. Device and content restrictions apply. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games.
Okay, time for a very quick academy briefing. United's under-16s have been in Hong Kong over the last few days. A fantastic annual trip. 2 games in front of fans under the floodlights. Players like Kai Rooney and JJ Gabriel and loads of others playing. They do loads of cultural activities while they're there. It's a really amazing thing. And there's a great film from last year's trip on United's website and app if you're interested. I recommend watching it. And it does show how special the academy experience can be for young footballers. Just before we preview United's first Premier League game of the season, we'll have guess the player clue 3. Jack, I have an answer. You're just going to have to trust me when I tell you at the end whether it's right.
I have a guess. I'm not convinced it's right.
Okay,
but I have a
let's
guess.
keep them both in mind. And I'm willing to commit mine to. I'm saying what I have in my head now. I won't be changing from. Are you willing to do that? Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Let's have clue 3 and see who's right.
And now for the final clue. I returned to the club in 2021 to take up a player coach position with the under-21 team, despite being much older.
I'm sticking with my clue, and we'll have
I'm sticking with mine as well.
Okay, we'll reveal the answer just after we talk about Fulham briefly. It's exciting. I'm glad we're playing on the Friday. I would rather be on the Saturday 3 p.m. But compared to last season when we played on the Monday, we were talking about this at Wembley and on the way back. It was terrible, and I feel like that set the tone for the season of like a boring Monday night fixture when the excitement of the opening weekend of the Premier League has already disappeared. Yeah. So to be part of the very first game instead is a massive improvement. It's hard to know the team now, but you would expect something fairly similar to what we saw at Wembley. And I think after Saturday, I'm kind of excited, having not been before.
Yeah, I am. I'm not going to lie. I was beginning to kind of dread this season. It felt like the signs were really not pointing in a very good direction. The one sort of really big source of excitement was Euro coming in, and then obviously he gets injured, and you just think, God, and
Højlund as well.
Yeah, and Højlund, you just think, God, even the exciting players that we do have aren't going to be available. But actually, I was really impressed with the way that we approached the Community Shield. It was a lot better than I expected. Obviously, now Ligt and Mazraoui coming in as well. I don't think either of them are going to be like huge game changer signings, but it's decent players, especially Ligt, I think will be really useful.
And I think they'll probably both start on Friday as long as their medicals go through successfly early in the week. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see whether Dallo or Mazraoui starts at left back. Been an interesting one to see, but I'm excited to watch this United team. I hope that Zirkzee plays as well because I'm excited to see him. And again, I'm worried that I hope that the reason he didn't come on was just maybe match fitness. Again, we were kind of in the ascendancy once those first wave of subs came on, so maybe Ten Hag just didn't want to change things too much. But this is his chance now, and to me, if he doesn't get given an opportunity while Højlund is out, you sort of think, well, what role is he supposed to be playing here? So I'd like to see him play. I think if it's something like Onana, Dalot, De Ligt, Martinez, Mazraoui, probably the classic midfield three of Casemiro, Kobe, and Bruno Fernandes, and then Rashford. I mean, would you play Rashford and Ahmad out wide? Would you play Garnacho?
Ahmad and Garnacho.
Ahmad and Garnacho, and then Zirkzee up front.
Yeah, fine by me. Lock it in.
So you'd start Garnacho over Rashford?
Yeah, at the moment, 100%. Rashford has to earn his way back into the team. I'd bring him off the bench and try and get him a goal and confidence if United are in a good spot. And yeah, we need him to be good, but Garnacho deserves to start at the moment.
Fair enough.
Okay, prediction?
I think we're going to go behind and end up winning 3-1.
Lovely. I was going to go 2-1 United just because I have no idea what Fulham's team is like right now because we're still in that part of the season. So I'm going to...
Well, I mean, they have a lot of... Emil Smith-Rowe and Andreas Pereira, two midfielders we're going to have to be very careful. And Muniz as well, who I was really impressed by last year.
I could see 3-2 United with Andreas and Emil scoring.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
In also a Friday night first Premier League game, it could be a little bit mad.
I've got to say,
I'm well up for that.
Fulham actually have a lot of players that I like. I really like Anthony Robinson, the left back as well. I think he's really good. They're one of those teams that on paper you look at them and you think, wow, they could be the next sort of Brighton team, pushing into like the top 7 or 8, and it just never seems to quite happen for them. But maybe this is the year.
Yeah, could well be. Okay, I'll let you say your guess first.
So my guess, I was racking my brains, and the third clue confirmed it. My guess before that was Paul McShane.
And mine was the same. So if this is correct, I think it is, then we'll both get 2 points to start the season. Let's hear from Craig.
And the answer is, of course, Paul McShane.
Paul McShane. Okay, 2 points to both of us. Lovely way to start the season. Thank you to Craig from 505 Sportswear for giving us that. And I look forward to competing throughout the season. Jack says United to win 3-1 against Fulham. I say 2-1 or potentially 3-2 because I'm indecisive at the start of the season.
Who's going to score for United?
Garnacho, Ahmad and Matthias de Ligt.
Okay.
That'd be great.
That would be nice.
First game with the updated tunnel at Old Trafford as well, which looks better. I think it could still be even better, but it's the little things, and I think the players will actually be excited to be in it for the first time. So I think those things do make a bit of a difference. 100%. For more from us throughout the week, you can find Jack on Twitter at
UTD Tait, Tait.
You can find me at Harry Robinson 64 and the podcast itself at UTD Weekly Pod. And if you want to support the show, please sign up to be a patron for as little as £1.50 a month, upwards to however much you would like. Go to patreon.com/United Weekly Podcast for bonus Q&As, ad-free episodes, and you get all of your episodes before normal subscribers. So it's a triple whammy of benefits. And enjoy United's first game of the season, and we'll speak to you next week. Goodbye.
Social Podcast Network.